thank you everyone for coming to our special call meeting with our budget presentation tonight, to approve our budget. We have some guests. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you taking the time to come down here and hear our presentation. We're all looking forward to it. I think we'll go ahead and move to item B and approve the consent agenda. We are ready to do that. I just wanted to remark that I love seeing former students who are coming back to Pulaski County to teach and work. It's always fulfilling. So, if we've all had a chance to look at it, I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda. There is one.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Golden. Will I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Benson. I apologize. I've been at a Zoom meeting all day long. Ms. Porter?
Dr. Cash,
Yes.
Mr. Benson,
Yes.
Ms. Cox,
Yes.
Mr. Hurst,
Yes.
Ms. Golden.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We'll move on to action items now, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dr. Sears, Mr. Stafford, Dr. Sears, Mr. Stafford. Okay, thank you, Mr. Stafford.
Thank you, Dr. Cash, and welcome everyone. We, of course, want to present our proposed 2022-2023 school budget. So if no further ado, we do the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so great picture of the welding lab ribbon cutting that if you all had an opportunity to see was really fantastic. So with the, of course, the General Assembly budget, first an update on the General Assembly budget. Of course, the General Assembly adjourned without an approved state budget. The governor has called for a special session to convene on April 4th for legislators to finish work on the budget. The House and Senate both each passed different budget bills, and we reviewed those in the previous presentation. Because the two competing budget bills were so different in terms of revenue, excuse me, just silence that. We felt it was best to use the most conservative budget estimate possible, and then we could adjust our own budget once the final state budget is approved. The main differences in revenue is between the House and Senate budget bills. Of course, were with taxation, with various tax cuts, and hopefully we will have with the April 4th budget session or special session, we will have an approved budget very soon. So the House budget, which is the most conservative projection of state revenue, is what we're using to base our proposed budget for you tonight. Just to explain this, we have a statutory deadline of April 1st to have an estimate of needs, a proposed budget, and present that to the Board of Supervisors for their review. Then in turn, the Board of Supervisors has another deadline of May 1st to communicate funding for FY23 for next year. So despite the fact that the General Assembly is going to be meeting in April, our statutory deadlines don't change. So that's the reason we had to have a proposed budget sent to the county for their review by April 1st, hence tonight's meeting. So to look at the House revenue projection is $2,748,588 based on an average daily membership of 3,831. The good news is that that is a increase over what our current budget is based on an ADM of 3807. So we're very encouraged by the projection from Weldon Cooper at Weldon Cooper Center that their average daily membership is trending upward. The state revenue projection that I'm presenting with the House budget is inclusive of a compensation supplement provided to fund 4% raises for SOQ funded teaching and support positions for FY 2023. The governor's and Senate budgets include funds for a 5% increase. And you'll see that we did not change our recommendation for an increase at this point based on the House budget, but the revenue is going to be less because it is based on a 4% increase for teachers and staff. I also want to mention to you that whenever the state gives a compensation supplement for raises, be it 4% or 5%, what they are actually funding is the state share of SOQ recognized positions, standards of quality, positions recognized in the standards of quality. So, so first of all, there's a local share that we have to come up with for those positions, and then in addition, there are many other locally funded positions that we have, and every school division has, that are not funded in the standards of quality. There's not a single school division in Virginia that goes strictly by the standards of quality, because for us, that would, literally mean we would not have any assistant, we don't receive any funding for assistant principals at the elementary school level. In fact, I don't think we even receive funding for a full-time principal at Snowball Elementary School based on that enrollment. And on and on and on, I could go on and on, but, no school division goes by strictly by the standards of quality. So we're always gonna have that local match, plus any locally funded positions. So I just kind of want to say that whenever the General Assembly says we funded a salary increase for teachers and staff, well, they funded a portion of that, and then it's always incumbent upon finding local funds to be able to match that. The average in Virginia is that the school divisions have to match or make up 56% of the funds for a state-supported salary increase. So the state doesn't even, on average, within the Commonwealth, doesn't fund even half, and that's the case for us as well. So continuing on with the different revenue sources here, just kind of we're showing that increase in state funds, federal funds, and then I'll come back to that in a second. County funds, which ends up being our request for county funding for next year. Our other funds category, which is basically reimbursables and things like that do not make up a significant portion of our funding. But so the total would be a total budget of $66,811,246, which is a change of $4,344,008. Again, this is based on the House budget. We don't know. I feel like that we will receive more in state funding, but that is the most conservative estimate that we have right now. So to also mention the federal funds, because in most years, that federal number that you would see would be about $5 million, $4 to $5 million. So normally those sources of federal funding would be your Title I funding, your special education IDEA money, your Carl Perkins that we use for CTE programming, and a few other grants. But of course, with the different ESSER monies that we get as an educational entity, that has increased significantly. So I just kind of wanted to mention to you tonight before we go over the budget priorities, because a lot of, I think, people have heard and say, oh, the school system is, has a lot of federal money. Well, we do. It's historic in terms of the federal money we have. And the position, so the ESSER 1 money that we originally got, kind of when COVID started, that was used to do many things, purchase PPE, purchase Chromebooks, our first round of Chromebooks for students. We did a lot of, I don't want to say emergency purchases, but a lot of needs that we had at that moment during the pandemic. But the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 monies, which are represented in these totals, we've been able to take, I guess, a more strategic look at what our needs are. And so the approach that we've taken with these funds are to almost entirely fund capital projects that are allowable per the ESSER guidelines, in addition to learning loss programs. So the capital projects, I just kind of want to just throw a few numbers out here. So for this year's budget, of the 16 million that you're seeing there, the ESSER money represents $11,591,922. That balance now, from what in terms of what we've used, what we have on hand, is $10,936,728. But of that amount, 9.1 million, or specifically $9,160,013 is committed to capital projects, which is 84% of those funds. Some of those capital projects include, in fact, Mr. Scholl was up on roofs at 3 of our schools today with potential roofing contractors, because we have a substantial roofing contract that's out to bid to replace entirely the roofs on Kreiser and Snowball Elementary School. Kreiser Elementary School's never had the roof actually replaced, as well as to replace a portion of the roof at Pulaski County High School, a leaking portion, I guess, over the band and choral rooms. In addition, we have working on bids to replace all of the exterior doors at Pulaski County High School, which I think you would agree that would be a wonderful thing to do, because those doors are looking very, very worn. Also replacing the exterior doors at Kreiser Elementary School. Also air conditioning places in our buildings that are still not air conditioned. The gym at Pulaski County High School, the gym at Dublin Elementary School, the cafeteria at Dublin Elementary School, the kitchen at Dublin Elementary School. They're still unair conditioned areas that our students and staff have to work in. So we are trying to use these funds to address some of the needs that we have. They may not have always been at the top of our capital priority list, but our ESSER money can only be used for specific purposes. So we've tried to tailor those projects to within the allowable uses for these funds. So again, 9.1 million that we have on hand is being dedicated to capital projects. The other portion of that, about 1.6 million, is dedicated to learning loss programs. One of the requirements of the ESSER 3 or American Rescue Plan money is that we dedicate at least minimum 20% of our funds to learning loss programs within the school division to try to bring our students that are woefully behind, as well as all students nationwide, back up on where they need to be academically. And I know Dr. Sears, do you want to mention some of the, programs, the learning loss programs that
we've already started it this year. We've got the before-school tutoring, the after-school tutoring programs. We've got after-school virtual tutoring. We've got after-school STEAM camps. Saturday school. We're running an additional section of summer school this summer so that we can capture more kids into that. And we will be running those same programs next year and the following summer as well. So the 1.6 million that Mr. Staff was talking about will be funding those programs, and the participation has just been outstanding. We have been surprised at the number of students who are either coming in early or staying after, and I know Ms. Suma's not here, but it's probably about 600 to 700 students now who are participating in those learning loss recovery programs. So we're very happy with that level of participation, and think that it will bear out when we start having to submit all these accountability measures at the end of the year with SOL tests and attendance rates, but that's another area that we're held accountable and our accreditation is based on. But just having those services and Ethleen's folks have done a great job in providing students with meals and stay for those programs. So it is meeting a number of needs for our families and for our school division to be able to have those programs.
Thank you. So again, the federal money that we're talking about is primarily already committed to, just that, the capital projects and the learning loss programs. And furthermore, even the funds that we do have flexibility for, I will say that one of the things I learned years ago when we had a wave of stimulus money back in the Great Recession was that you don't want to spend one-time funds on recurring costs. And so many of the things we're talking about is an operating budget, the priorities that we're talking about tonight. So the vast majority are things that we're going to be having to pay for year after year, such as salary increases and things of that nature. So if you tie that to one-time funding, you're really setting yourself up for a fiscal cliff a year or two down the road that you don't want to have to go off of and do reductions in force and things of that nature. I think a lot of school divisions, I know a decade ago when that money came out, a lot of school divisions made that mistake, and I just want to make sure that we don't, that at the end of the day, when the money runs out, that we will have achieved a lot of things, but that we are not harmed in the process, and no one, that we're better off, and so.
Just to give an example of that, when I went to Monroe County, West Virginia, superintendent, they had done just that, used the stimulus money and created all these additional positions, which were good positions, but they were not funded for more than a 2-year period. And so when I came there in 2010, the stimulus money was starting to be held back, and as a result, for both years I was there, we had to do 10% RIF across the board, all positions, central office positions, administrators, teachers, support staff. So for both those years, and we still weren't able to capture it all, but I think the year after I left with additional cuts, they were finally able to get it back down and take out those positions that had been put in with stimulus money, but there was no recurring funds to support.
So to, I guess, move forward into our budget priorities, and let me just say, I say these are priorities, but I don't want this to, anyone to have the idea that these are in a strict numerical order, that this is 1 and this is 2 and this is 3, because as we do every year, we work on a budget, we will have to adapt and make changes as things change and our funding changes. So I will not say that just because I'm going to go over this one first and the other one, the last one last. Please don't think that they are in some type of a absolute prioritized order here tonight. But first of all, I do want to mention that due to the COVID-19 pandemic and other needs, we have increased our staffing somewhat in mid-year, which would include a third Cougar assistant at the high school, a transportation manager, a PR specialist, and a rotating school nurse. And while the cost of these positions, we were able to cover these in the current year due to staffing vacancies, we do need to budget these for next year. And so the total projected cost of these positions next year, salaries and benefits, would be $244,625. The next slide is a minimum 5% raise and step increase for our teachers. I say minimum because what we have done, is created a new salary scale for our teachers, a proposed salary scale to incorporate that 5% salary increase. As I mentioned before, the governor's budget, the Senate budget includes a 5% money for a 5% increase, but the House budget only has 4%. But at this time, surrounding school divisions all are saying that they're keeping 5% increase in their current budget, so we did not want to reduce that at this time, just based on the House budget. A comparison of our current teacher salary scale with surrounding school divisions shows that we're competitive with the starting salary, which is great, and the ending salary, which is great, but then not as competitive in between. And this is especially going to be true when we compare a pay scale to Radford City Public Schools. So the next couple slides is kind of show you a graph. This is where we are currently with the average of our surrounding school divisions. We're not the highest, we're not the lowest, we are a little above average, which is great. But then the next slide kind of shows you just a direct competitor, if you will, across the bridge for new teachers and so forth, where we start off comparable or a little bit above, and then quickly dip in comparison to their salary progression, and then we finally exceed at the end. However, that kind of misses a lot of peak earning years for those teachers. So to try to address this with the next slide, the new salary scale that's been proposed would start increasing those steps, or those salary amounts in the early stages of a teacher's career. And so to do that, we have to increase those early steps and then kind of keep the later steps constant. This new scale would provide a minimum of 5% pay increase to all teachers, and most would receive a higher percent increase based on what step they are on. And the projected cost of this new scale, including the step increase for those teachers, would be $1,541,238. The next slide, of course, we also want to compensate our support staff. So the estimated cost of providing a 5% raise for our support staff employees is approximately $384,407. That includes their employer-paid fringe benefits for VRS and FICA. This amount excludes the cost of some new salary scales that were developed for custodians, paraprofessionals, and bus drivers that I'm going to review here next. So the next slide would be a new custodial salary scale. With the next increase in Virginia minimum wage, let me go back to last year. We were in a position with our starting and many of our hourly rates for custodians where when the minimum wage went up, we were going to be below minimum wage. So we had to do something and increase that. And we have taken the approach to, at least so far, that we want our starting wage to be at least $1 above minimum wage for custodians. So in order to keep that approach for next year with the new heightened minimum wage, then we would need to increase that from, well, the minimum wage goes up from $11 to $12 per hour. So we would want to increase that at least the starting rate to $13 an hour. And a proposed custodial salary scale that's been developed, including the cost of employer-paid fringe benefits, is approximately $104,981. Also, I want to mention here tonight that we took the same approach with their school cafeteria staff. Although it's not included in this budget presentation, last year we increased their starting wage to $1 above minimum wage, and we would want to do the same thing with their scale as well. However, we don't include that in here because the cafeteria staff, all of the school cafeterias are operated through the school cafeteria funds, and no local money actually goes into the operation of school cafeterias. Those are kept separate from the school operating budget, and those are funded primarily through USDA money and a little bit of state money. So the next slide We have talked a lot the last couple of years about how can we retain and recruit bus drivers, school bus drivers, because you know, we have literally had a few days this year where we had nobody to drive a bus for a route, and every substitute is out, and you know, we've had to double up routes, and we're in a real situation here going forward with trying to attract bus drivers. So we've done a comparison of our bus driver salary scale to surrounding school divisions, and actually we compare favorably to those other school systems. We're either ranked number 1 or number 2 at each step of the scale, so we feel good about that. But nevertheless, it's still a challenge for us, and we wanted to try to find some options for us to help with this very unique workforce that we have. I say unique because of the demographics and really different ages of probably in terms of demographics, it's the most diverse group that we have in terms of different ages of people working in that group. So we, Mr. Scholl and I, several weeks ago had a bus driver meeting to focus on and really just ask, what do you think would help, help you stay, keep driving? What do you think would help others start driving the school bus? And just the long story short, the vast majority preferred increased pay rather than increasing benefits. That does make sense just because of the unique demographics of the group. Many of them don't start driving until they retire. So the thought of starting a retirement plan at that point, having to pay into a retirement plan, may not be seem like a good investment for them, as well as health insurance, because many of them already have access to health insurance through Medicare. So we wanted to focus on the increase in compensation. However, a recurring concern that we did get from the meeting was that from some drivers is that our current pay scale for bus drivers, which is a 30-year step scale, kind of like a lot of other positions that we have in the system, teachers, just about every position, results in many veteran drivers never being able to reach top pay. That's because so many of them might start driving when they're retired or semi-retired. So the thoughts of having to work 30 years, more years to reach top pay seems kind of hard to reach. So to address this issue, we did develop a new bus driver pay scale that reduces the number of steps to 16. That would be someone starting off new all the way up to 15 plus. And what the scale would do is would be to move more of our drivers up to the top of that pay scale. In fact, anyone that's in that 16 to 30 range would be moved up to the top pay, and do that faster than what our current scale is. So just to give you, although I don't have the scale up here, that would increase the starting pay for bus drivers from $80.36 per day to $85 per day, and then that top rate would increase from $114.93 up and go up to $125 per day. So that's how it would affect the beginning and the top of the scale. But again, those that are in the middle, so to speak, would see a pretty substantial increase, moving them up to that top rate. So the projected cost that we came up with of $157,587 would also include the cost of employer paid FICA. Next, another proposal that we have is to make some changes to our paraprofessional workforce. When the Affordable Care Act was first enacted, one of the things that our school division did, and others, to try to deal with the impact it's had on certain positions that worked over 30 hours per week that would immediately be eligible for health insurance, was to create some part-time positions to try to lessen the financial burden of having to offer the health insurance. And so, so we have a set. We have full-time paraprofessionals, and then we have a small group now of part-time paraprofessionals that are still not eligible for benefits. In addition, when we were making changes to our custodial pay scale, we made no changes to the paraprofessional pay scale last year. So if we don't make a change now, we're going to reach a point where we're going to have one group making more than another group, and we really need to kind of keep everyone on par. And so we had proposed a new paraprofessional pay scale that would raise the starting hourly rate to $14. That would also incorporate converting the 17 remaining part-time paraprofessionals to full-time status. And then when we make that change to those 17 remaining part-timers, then having to offer them PRS and health insurance, that amount, our projected total cost is $462,704.
Ms. Bolger, how many total paraprofessionals do we have now?
Right around 45, and we've got, I think, at least 6 positions that are open.
So we're down about 35 from where we were 4.5 years ago.
And that's a fair point as well, is that we have made strides over the past several years to reduce staffing where we could in the paraprofessional workforce. So we also next would have some additional teaching positions in this list. A number of teaching positions have been requested to accommodate student enrollment. New programs are providing more instruction in specific areas. This is a reduced list. We narrowed this down to an additional teacher at Snowball due to enrollment increase there. An additional teacher in the CTE center, and that is the start an EMT program. I know Ms. Atkinson has been working very hard to start an EMT program that I think is going to be beneficial for our students, for the county as well, to set up have a feeder system of students going into those first responder jobs that are really hard to fill. An additional elementary gifted teacher. This was reduced several years ago from 2 down to 1 because it went unfilled. But now that we've identified a teacher that is eligible to teach gifted, we would like to add that position back. And I will say that this is when we reduced that position, we did get a lot of feedback from parents that were very not happy that their elementary age child would only be receiving gifted instruction for very limited amounts of time. So I think, especially now that enrollment seems to be increasing a little bit, I think we really should do what we can to add this position back. And then additionally, 2 elementary specialist teachers. So the projected cost of adding these 5 teaching positions based on new teacher salary scale plus benefits is $322,735. Additional assistant principal at Pulaski County Middle School. When the 2 middle schools were combined, we did eliminate 1 school administrator position. We went from 2 principals and 2 assistant principals down to 1 principal and 2 assistant principals, even though the number of students really did not change. And after opening PCMS, we recognized that we do need an additional administrator to help handle student discipline, coverage of athletic and after-school activities, student supervision, and other duties. This position could be an 11-month position, rather than a 12-month position like the other middle school administrators. And a placeholder that I have for this is, estimated cost is $93,056. That amount is just kind of a budget placeholder because it really just depends on if you have someone new to administration coming in versus someone with a lot of experience. If someone takes health insurance versus not taking health insurance, that amount can fluctuate by literally $20,000 or $30,000, depending on where they're at on the scale. Next, a full-time activities director at Pulaski County Middle School. Since the opening of the middle school, we've been able to offer many new sports that we previously didn't have with Dublin and Pulaski middle schools. Boys and girls soccer, baseball, softball, cross country. I probably missed some, but those are just the ones that I thought of that we've added. In addition, we've added more activities and clubs. We have a fishing team that's actually is off the ground now, as well as a dance team, chess and debate teams. We currently have a PE teacher who serves as the athletic director in addition to his teaching duties. Basically, he has one block that he's given to handle all of the athletic director duties at that school, which is just really have grown exponentially. So we feel like there's an overwhelming need to have a full-time activities director to better manage all of these activities that we have for other middle schoolers. And again, a budget placeholder that we have for that would be $93,056. Next, we have a proposal to add paraprofessionals in all of our kindergarten classrooms. To accommodate this request, an additional 19 paraprofessionals would be needed. And the total projected cost of adding those paraprofessionals would be $364,809. And then if we estimated if a little over half would elect employee-only health insurance, then that total cost would increase to $445,929. Dr. Shears, would you like to speak on that?
Yes, this is something that has come to us from the community. We have some folks here who've spoken at previous board meetings. And what we know is that we finish school in late May, early June every year with our pre-K classes with a 10-to-1 student to adult ratio. And then we send them home for 3 months and bring so same kids back and add kids in who've never been in any type of structured environment and have a 24-to-1 ratio from that point forward. And it really causes us to have a slow start to the school year. You know, Ms. Castelluccio, we have a few folks here who have taught a lower elementary and they could probably attest to it much better than I can. You're going to spend probably the first quarter of the school year just trying to get those routines down and helping students to understand the expectations and how not to hurt other kids when they're playing. I mean, before you can even start really working on the instructional side of things. So, you know, we know that other school divisions and in West Virginia, it is actually required that if you have more than 10 kindergarten students in a class, you have to have a paraprofessional in there, and it would allow the teacher to do structured reading groups, small group instruction, and have someone else who could be working with other students on whatever other subjects they may be working on, and just the overall student safety issue, especially in Chrysler, where it was built with an open floor plan. It's a constant struggle just to keep those kids in those classrooms because a 4 or 5-year-old can dart out the door while the teacher bends down to help a student tie their shoe. It's just things happen that quickly, and it's something that they really struggle with. So having an extra set of eyes in every classroom would also help us better ensure student safety in kindergarten classes.
So the next slide would be for student Chromebook replacements. And again, this is an operating budget, so that the things we have in here are all would be recurring costs. In the past few years, we have been able to provide a Chromebook for every student in every grade, which is something I didn't know that would happen this quickly when we started this process. The Chromebooks at the high school were mostly funded by a state grant, which is phasing out after this year. This is the last year that we're eligible to receive any monies from that. The Chromebooks for Pulaski County Middle School were provided as part of the project budget for the school. And then the elementary Chromebooks were paid for with the original award of ESSER 1 federal grant funds. So we now, we have a lot of devices in a lot of students' hands, but if any of you all own a laptop or a phone, you realize that that's not going to last a very long time. So we need to begin a student Chromebook replacement cycle for at least 3 grades per year, beginning next year. And the estimated cost that Mr. Whitaker has provided through the quotes we've gotten will be approximately $445,690. I feel like this is something that we've started and we really can't walk away from now. It's kind of become an expectation for students and parents and teachers.
It's kind of an expectation and requirement of society that we use technology.
Sure.
Otherwise, you go to the gas pump, and if you have the money to buy the gas, you can't even use the gas pump because you're using a computer, an ATM, or you can't fill out the application when you get out of school. And I know this has happened down at Lowe's, because they point you over to the corner, to the kiosk to do your application. You know, it is in the best interest of all of us in this county to make sure that we are teaching with technology.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very strongly about that.
So finally, I think our last budget priority is to establish a budget or a non-personnel budget for BDOE reporting language. It's information services, but we were calling it the public relations specialist budget. So we need to create a new budget for this department. Right now, the only cost that I've estimated here would be for the printing cost and postage of their newsletter that we've already started. We have been able to reduce this amount from what we originally had it as. We've now received approval for our nonprofit mailing permit, and that's going to significantly reduce our postage costs. So right now, that recommended starting budget would be $47,000. That's $24,000 for printing and $23,000 for postage. And we have, I will have to say, we received a lot of positive feedback from our first newsletter that we put out, going to all of our citizens, just for them to know what's going on in our schools. So again, this is just a recap of the state revenue figure that I provided, as well as these budget priorities. And then in the next slide, you see the difference between the estimated revenue and the estimate for the budget priorities would be $1,595,420, which would be our additional funding request for county funding for next year. And of course, as I mentioned again, we know that the state revenue figure is going to change, but to fulfill our statutory duty, we did have to pass a budget, knowing with the numbers that we had. So what we will do is, whenever the General Assembly hopefully has an approved budget in April, we can revise this request and then communicate that to the county with the revised state revenue number, and hopefully that then that county funding request would decrease as well. It's a lot of information to cover, but I'll be glad to try to answer any questions anyone may have.
fortunately, we've seen it several times, so, and you make it easy for an English teacher to understand all of those numbers, so I always
Good.
appreciate your expertise in that area. Does anyone on the board have any, questions for Mr. Stafford or Dr. Sears? There being no questions, any discussion? Nobody? Then, all we have left to do is approve the proposed, fiscal year 2022-2023 school operating budget for Pulaski County Public Schools. Do I hear a motion in that regard?
Madam Chairman, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. Ms. Porter?
Dr. Cash?
Yes.
Mr. Benson?
Yes.
Ms. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
Ms. Golden?
Yes. Okay. There being no other business before the board, we are adjourned.
Are you going to get comments from the public?
Parliamentarian, we don't normally have a public comments section, but I think we can adjourn and then you can address us.
Sure.
Okay. All right, hold on. Go ahead.
Well, there's a few of us from a community conversation group that are wanting to partner well with you all in the public school education proficiency and impact on all of our young people. We started with the equity mission statement and moving forward, and we're really happy to see that you have put in your budget for this next year the additional kindergarten paraprofessionals for the sake of helping our young people get hopefully a little stronger start in reading proficiency, because less of a gap there is in that achievement area as the children grow through their education, the better off we're all going to be. So I just want to say thank you for putting that in. Thank you all for passing it, and we'll do a little woo-hoo heel click outside there. Thank you.
School board members, you have in your packet a list of end of the year activities. Brenda put that together a few days ago, just so you'll know when all the promotion ceremonies are. And also the choir, drama, and band students will be holding their night at the movies tomorrow at 6:30 at the high school.
6:30 at the high school.
Yes.